Hey everybody, Brandon Dragon here, author of The Resurrection of Jesse Barrow. I am here with Jordan Mitchell, who I am thrilled to introduce. He is the narrator of the audiobook. Jordan, I will let you say hi and kind of let you introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, how you got into recording audiobooks and all that kind of thing.
All right. Hi, Brandon. Like you said, I'm Jordan Mitchell. I am an Atlanta-based actor and singer. Um, Kind of just breaking into the Atlanta theater scene. I've only been down here for a couple of years. Um, yeah, so it's kind of a weird story how I got into recording. It's like voiceover stuff is something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, mostly just because I've always thought it was interesting and just a little bitty part of everyone telling me, "Oh my God, your voice is amazing. You should do something with it."
For sure, for sure.
Um,
I would have told you that too had I known you before this. So.
um, and it's funny. I laugh because this is literally I just stole my dad's voice. My dad's voice sounds exactly like this, but a little bit deeper. And so, uh, got fun stories about that later if we have time. But yeah, so I started kind of like after college and moving around and uh trying to figure out what was going to happen over the pandemic. I was made aware of the Audible freelance site ACX. And I thought about it and I kind of just went, you know what? Carpe diem. So I went out, bought a basic microphone and mixer set and set it up in my closet, and
That's
here we
awesome,
are.
man. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I'm certainly glad that you did. Just so everybody kind of knows, from my perspective, looking for an audiobook narrator, you kind of put the feelers out, and then people send you auditions and all those kinds of things. And when we were looking for the story of Jesse Barrow in particular, I heard Jordan's audition, and from the get-go, it was kind of like there's no question that this is the guy for this story. So,
Well,
yeah,
thanks.
really, really glad you were out there. So, what drew you to doing this story, other than just it was a potential gig?
I mean, it was definitely that. It was one of the many tabs I had open on ACX of potential books. I had sent in uh, several other auditions as well before I got to Resurrection of Jesse Barrow. Um, and they say never judge a book by its cover, but that's the first picture you see on the page, and it was this very striking blue that immediately caught my attention, um with the shovel and the tomato vines. And I read the description about you know um this guy who was being accused of something that he didn't do, and those are always fun stories. I mean, that's why they've made so many movies about the Count of Monte Cristo.
Yeah,
He did a crime, but I didn't do the crime, but I'm going to get in trouble for it anyway.
yeah.
So those stories are always interesting to see where the author's going to take it. So when I read the initial script, and it started off so unlike I was expecting, with talking about his ex-wife, and I'm sitting here, did he maybe not kill his wife? Is that what's going on here? But the further along I got into it, it was just like, oh, this is interesting now. Okay.
All right. Cool. Well, I like that. Yeah, and we definitely want to try not to give away too many spoilers. Just thinking, courtesy of the folks that haven't read it yet,
Mm-hmm.
or the folks who are waiting to listen to you read it to them, which I would highly recommend. So when you go into reading this, so Jesse Barrow, it's a story takes place the early 1900s in the
Mm-hmm.
deep, deep South. There are, obviously characters of different genders involved. There are characters of different socioeconomic
Mm-hmm.
uh, levels, characters of different races. So, like, how do you approach developing a character as far as a sound, um, do you try to give them each a distinctive voice, or is it more in your inflection that you try to develop that?
Um, I kind of look at it, and I, use my years of theater training here. I look at each character and as best I can in my head give them a distinctive voice. Whether or not I can reproduce that voice, I think is fairly irrelevant,
Okay.
because then the character is different in my mind, and then that kind of comes through in the
Yeah,
vocalization. And I found it interesting coming up with voices and inflections for all these characters, because I'm so used to putting a character in the whole body, whereas in this capacity, it's just my voice.
that's interesting.
Uh, so that was interesting to kind of navigate around, and my wife helped me out with it a little bit. She is also a musical theater actor.
Okay, very cool.
Just she is a jack of all trades when it comes to the theater, so it's
That's
great. So she
awesome.
was able to help me out. But like for characters like Jesse Barrow, you don't want the southern accent to come across as cartoonish. You don't want to go in there, getting all the boomhauer up on them. No, because that does a disservice to the character, but it also is a disservice to anybody who actually has a southern accent
Yeah,
like that. it,
yeah,
it becomes a parody, and so
right.
you would just want to find the honesty in the character. And and he just Jesse Barrow has a very kind of like train of thoughts kind of way of speaking, I think. But he has a very high vocabulary, and which I very much appreciated, because there were a lot of words in there that were brand new to me, and I'm just, how do I pronounce that?
So in writing it, I probably had the same question. you know, Words that I would come across that are like, I need to use that because that looks incredible and that would
Yep.
fit so well. But I'm also not sure what language this is.
um, yeah, so that's kind of where I try to come from with characters. When it comes to female characters, I look at it and I'm just like, I'm going to do my best. My vocal
Sure.
cords are very thick, so trying to do a high pitched voice for a very long time, my throat gets so dry, because I'm having to use more air pressure to keep it at that timbre.
Sure.
So my female voices aren't that great, but they do come across as distinctive.
Sure. Sure. No, I
Um,
definitely. And I thought, yeah, that was one of the things that I did appreciate was everybody kind of had a very honest, and like you said, it wasn't an over the top cartoonish take on it, which this story with the accents, in the wrong hands or the wrong voice, so to speak, could have.
mhm,
So I definitely appreciate that. Um, so let me ask you, having read through the novella, having read it, I mean, and again, without trying to give away too many
mhm.
spoilers as far as the plot itself, what were some of your takeaways?
Jesse is, despite being a bit of a charmer, I think he's very introspective. Um, he does, and you can tell he's telling this story to you, and it just, phrases are hard.
That's okay.
um, it, Jesse is just very honest. Is really the best thing I can say about it. It is a very honest novella, and while like a lot of well, not a lot, but some of his opinions kind of make its way into the narrative, they aren't detracting from the story, and they actually, if they don't progress it, they definitely tie in, because there's one section where he's having this whole introspective monologue um about what was he talking about, like sausage and justice, like the very beginning. He's saying all this stuff is happening that people might not want to know about,
Yeah,
but you got to know.
yeah, Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and I think that was one of the things that I've talked about in the past with my writing style is um, I do my best not to judge my characters, and so there are things that just write themselves that most of the time, when I look back on what I've written, I can kind of see where that came from. And one of the things that I struggled with this story was, at the beginning, Jesse is this very poor, very
Mhm,
uneducated, um, person from a rural community in the Deep
mhm,
South. But I also heard that voice and I heard that vocabulary, and and it was him telling the story. And so, kind of as it happened, um, the way that the story progresses, he's telling us the story at a much later date in time.
mhm,
But I think what I enjoyed kind of looking back on what I had written was like you see his progression through time through the
mhm,
story.
yeah,
Because at the beginning, I think, like you talked about when he's talking about, his wife and the fact that she's been cheating on him, he can't really even come to acknowledge it.
mhm,
It's like he's not telling the truth at that point. He's masking it over because it's too painful. But then towards the end of the story and towards the end of his life, hopefully you see this progression where, like you said, it's no longer enough to know that these things have happened. We have to call
mhm,
them what they are,
yeah,
and we have to be honest about what's happening, rather than masking it for our own comfort. And so, I've been on that journey in a lot of ways myself, and so it was just interesting, and I do appreciate you seeing the honesty and where it ended up in terms of that character, and how he gets to that point.
yeah, absolutely. And that's what I really appreciated about really the book as a whole. Like the entire book was honest. It didn't hold back um anything. Uh I know there's a part my wife in one of the short stories, Camino Real. Um I was describing it to my
Yeah.
wife and she said, "Nope, nope, I'm about to go to bed. I don't want to hear about what happens." I'm just like, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, it got a little dark there for a
it
minute.
get it gets dark, but again, it's very honest. And yeah, you're aware you're being told a story, but it comes from a very honest place, and I really appreciated that about the book as a whole.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I've always strived to number one, like make uh write stories that I would want to read, but also, uh to let what is there come out, because I do think, I mean, this is, I mean, like in theater, you pour yourself into what you're doing on stage. This is really me pouring, what I'm learning, what I'm going through, onto the page. And yeah, and the hope is that resonates with the reader, whether they take from it what I intended or whether they get something from it, themselves. I mean, that's the point of
Mhm.
art, is kind of like you get what you bring to it, if you're willing to look at it with honest eyes as well. Um, so, all right. So, yeah. So, speaking of some of the other stories, and then there were a couple essays in there as well.
Mhm.
You have any, which, I threw in some more challenges there. You had to
Oh.
go from Alabama to Texas to a fictional Spanish-speaking
Hmm.
country, and oh, and Russian in there as
And
well
then, yep, the
with
Russian
advocate, and yeah.
in
So,
oh man,
was there
I
anything else that stuck out that you enjoyed reading in particular?
first off, yes, it was a big surprise. Like, I know the full title is Resurrection of Jesse Barra, a novella and collected works. I was expecting like, a novella and one or two short stories.
Yeah.
Which, was going to be a challenge in and of itself. Um, but then not only were the short stories in very different parts of the world that required very different accents and cadences, and then a couple of essays which in and of themselves aren't fun to read. um I looked at it, I was just like, this is my first project. Did I just bite more than I could chew? um
Well,
but
Jordan, I have to tell you, I would have been thrilled had you just read the novella. The fact that you stuck with it and went all the way through and did such a great job. Yeah, it's props to you. Thanks very much
yeah.
for sticking with that. So,
I mean, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, again, just like the entirety of the book was very honest and was coming from an honest place. So I really liked the emotional journey that um oh, what's his name? Main character from Advocat.
oh, no, you stumped me. Paul.
Success. No, Paul. That's
Yeah.
right. Um despite not actually moving through a space or doing anything physically, he is having this very strong emotional journey through the story over the telephone with a Russian refugee. And I very much appreciated all of that. Like it just goes to tell what good storytelling is, when you're able to have a beginning, middle, and end emotional journey with a character when he virtually does nothing.
Well,
Um,
I hadn't actually thought of it like that. So so
I mean,
that's an interesting take. I
yeah.
appreciate that.
Um, out of all of the short stories, I think Camino Real was my favorite.
Okay.
um just this journey, this very heart-wrenching, um physically exhausting, emotionally exhausting journey that Santi has to go through, um was just very, it resonated with me a lot, and of the, again, the spiritual honesty of like trying to figure out why a god would require the
Yeah.
sacrifices that Santi is being essentially forced to make.
Yeah.
Um, but then, again, that very powerful arc where he comes into his own and realizes,
Yeah.
you know, the journey is going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah, well, thank you. One of the kind of the taglines that I've used for that story, and I didn't it didn't really dawn on me until well after I had written it and self-published it the first time, was just this idea of like, um, you can stay on the path, uh, and keep your faith, or you can walk away and save your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, and again, that was a very, kind of a coming out of my personal journey, through a lot of things and through, my own spiritual, deconstruction or awakening or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I'm glad that resonated with you as well, and glad you were able to do such a fantastic job with that story as well. So
A lot of
we're
brushing up on my Spanish pronunciation with that one.
well, and we may have talked about it before we started recording, but yeah, for me as a writer, it's nice to not have to actually pronounce a lot of those words out loud. Um,
You just
but
leave it to the guys behind the microphone like me.
So anyway, we're kind of running out of time, but
Yeah.
Jordan, thank you so much, not only for your time tonight and sharing your thoughts, but also just for, like I said, for an incredible job with these stories. I couldn't be more happy. Jordan, if you have anything else, you're welcome to it.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to speak with you tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to work on this book. Like I said, it's my first project, and I had a lot of fun with it. So I'm looking forward to my future as an audiobook narrator and producer.
Definitely.
and I hope to see more of your books
Well,
on the
thank
site
you.
so I can throw my voice at them, see what happens.
Definitely.
And
Well,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, Jordan, thank you again. So, The Resurrection of Jesse Barrow, I'll hold the book up here. It's a novella, three collected short stories, two essays. If it's not available on Audible at the time you're listening to this, it will be very soon. Read by the fantastic, crazy talented Jordan Mitchell. So, Jordan, thanks so much. I'm gonna pause the recording and say goodbye to everybody, and then you and I can hang up the phone on the other end.